Hello and welcome to our June session of the Generation Restoration Dialogues brought to you by the UNCCD G20 Land Initiative. Today we are diving into the restoration economy, exploring how restoring land creates jobs, businesses, and vibrant communities. We align this with Desertification and Drought Day on the 17th of June, focusing on how restoration builds both environmental and economic resilience. Please do not forget to drop your questions in the Q&A box throughout the session. We will get to them later. Now let us begin. We start with Fabiola, our sustainability strategist and youth engagement consultant here at the G20 GLI. She'll walk us through how restoration connects youth, investment, and sustainable infrastructure, as well as introducing the two guests she came with today, the two YECOs, Mmakwena Moesi and Kemo from the Green Up Gambia. Fabiola?
Hi, how are you, Kelly? Hi, everyone joining. My name is Fabiola Nava. I'm the Youth Engagement Consultant with the G20 Global Land Initiative at the UNCCD. Today, I will be sharing with you, on behalf of my team, something that is at the core of our work, which is the restoration economy. I'll try to give an overview of what is it, what is not, and why it holds so much potential, not only for the job creation perspective, but for the restoring ecosystem and redefining how we think about economic opportunity. So I hope that after this conversation, all of you walk away seeing, land restoration in another light. I'm just sure if everyone is seeing the slides.
And okay.
Thank you very much, team. Thank you. So if we move on, yes, I just want to stop here for a bit, just to give a little bit perspective of what is the Global Land Initiative. So we were created back in 2020 when the Saudi Arabia was holding the presidency, with the powerful ambition to reduce 50% of degraded land globally by the 2040. So since then, we have been working to make land restoration not just like a policy priority, but also, like a pathway to resilience and opportunity. So we work along governments, business, civil society as well, and our team in youth particularly. So if we move on, please. And just to give you a perspective on why we are here and why we are focusing on land, why to build an entire initiative around it. So just to know, 25% of the world agricultural land is degrading and the number is increasing. So it's important to have in mind that the land is not just soil, it's the foundation of everything, from the food system, water supply, economies, culture even. And in the top of that, 90% of the jobs globally are tied to land, like even if it's directly or indirectly. So yet, when we are talking about the climate crisis, the land degradation, as you can see here, like often gets left out, it's not always in the conversation. And even though it's like deeply connected to the climate and biodiversity and the economy resilience. If we move on, please. So in a nutshell, the land is a foundation of everything. Without the land, we cannot protect the nature, not feed the people, and forget about tackling the climate crisis. And this is why the land restoration is not just an environmental solution. It is actually a human and economic necessity. In the next slide, we are tackling like the good stuff, like the restoration economy. So this economy is not longer seen as a cost or a niche or a CSR project. It's an emerging and thriving economic sector. The projections are showing that the restoration economy could reach $76 billion by 2031. And no wonder we are seeing also a clear trend where countries are committing to restore land and passing laws to do it, like from the restoration law in Europe, from the Kenya Startup Bill, or to Brazil commitment under the UN Decade. The governments are setting bold targets, but the thing here is that, governments alone won't plan, won't monitor, and they won't maintain the millions of hectares, they will need to contract the private sector. And here is the opportunity that we are talking about or discussing today, And whenever we talk about opportunities, it's always said that you have to be ready to take them. And so we ask ourselves, like if now the restoration is legally required, do we have the technical professionals to guide it? Here is where the young people is coming along, they are starting to learn and work on the landscape planning, regenerative culture, restoration tech, you name it, related to. So they are the pipeline for this transition. So as we can see, from the legislation comes the demand. From the demand comes the private innovation. And once the people can see that the restoration brings real results and returns, is when we will see investment flowing. So the restoration is not just, like good for the planet, it also delivers, and it's between $7 to $30 in value for everyone that we invested. So beyond that being right, it is smart. So in the next slide, just to be sure that we are in the same page, I just want to clear a few myths about what is it and what is not the restoration economy. So starting for the myth number one, it's just about planting trees. Well, in reality, the restoration includes soil science, data systems, carbon accounting, water management, even AI planning tools. So as you can see, it's not an activity, it's an industry. So number two, it's considered a charity. And just in the reality, as an example, in the United States, restoration generates 15 billion annually and support 225,000 jobs. And another example quickly, just in India, restoration work is embedded in National Rural Employment Guarantee and is employing millions per year, so it's not a charity. The number three, it's only for NGOs, which in reality, today the restoration actors include startups, investors, and cooperatives, So it's not only NGOs scope. The number four is too niche. Now, restoration touches agriculture, ecotourism, construction, or green supply chain. And the myth number fifth is that it's easy to measure. And in reality, the restoration impact things like biodiversity, water quality, and even our own well-being. And these are very valuable data, but however, it's not always easy to measure. And that's why we need long-term monitoring and better tools to track the progress over time. So what we can conclude in the next slide is that the restoration economy is not longer about charity nor compliance. It's a driver of a job creation, innovation, and economic resilience. And I think when we do it right, we are, like tackling two things. We are healing ecosystem and economies. Now that briefly we understand what is it and what is not, and what we are aiming with the G20 Global Land Initiative, just let me position in the next slide. Let me just give you a view where our efforts in all these contexts, you can see it, no? So this is our theory of change at the G20 Global Land Initiative. So you might ask, in terms of youth, where are we, right? So in the center is our objective, and then you can see all the, as a wheel, all the stakeholders that we touch, and our youth empowerment work is embedded here in red, as you can see, building entrepreneurship, capacity, and local delivery. So in the next slide, I'm sharing with you our mission, which is empower a new generation of ecopreneurs who see the land restoration as a business opportunity, not just as a environmental duty or a green flag. So we aim to support 10,000 of them by 2040. And then you might ask, how are we putting this to action? How are we going to reach to this? So in the next slide, you will see our dual pillar strategy, as we call it, to grow the next generation of restoration leaders. On one side, we have the focus on global engagement, which is focus on building visibility, skills, and providing access to global networks and knowledge and mentors. And then in the other side, we have the national engagement, where we are launching local pilots. We are offering direct support through accelerators, incubators, working hand in hand with them to make the restoration enterprise ready. And in the next slide, I will just give you a brief of what looks like each pillar. So in the global engagement, we have the Youth and Ecopreneur program, better known as YECO, that we have launched back in 2024, and we have been running successfully along our partners of ITC. And basically, this is a program that is a three-phase journey. It's an online bootcamp that it's covering everything from business models, marketing to IP, sustainable finance as well. Then we have an accelerator phase that is a mentorship for the top 25 participants. And finally, we have the YECO Award, which is a pitch live for funding, visibility, and then even after the program is finished, we are engaging with our YECO's alumni and supporting them. And what we have seen is inspiring and innovating at the same time. We have seen startups working with extreme microorganisms that are producing biofertilizers. We are working also with fintech platforms connecting grid farmers with the credit access. Then laser-based technologies removing invasive species without chemicals. And I mean, I can go on and more examples of what our YECO's alumni are working in, but we have two of them, and I'm sure they will explain beautifully how they're putting in action their work. And in addition to this program, we have a pipeline of partnership upcoming to keep supporting global ecopreneurs. For the other engagement that we have in the next slide, so it's an overview of what are we doing at the national level. So we want to grow our reach to achieve our target. So that's why we are coming to Brazil and Kenya, two countries that are not only ecologically significant, but also are startup powerhouses. So we are seeing them, there are a lot of momentum, and like the ecosystem is interested, ready, and we are coming there to try to amplify the work of the people that actually is working within the ecosystem. These pilots will work through partnership as well with accelerator, incubator, hubs, even youth networks, and bringing together for funding, visibility, and capacity building at a local level. So stay tuned, because you will hear a lot about what will be going on in these two countries. And if you happen to be in any of them, keep in touch with us, and we will be happy to hear from you. So with all this work that we are doing from both perspectives, in the next slide, we are just sharing with you what we have observed, from the idea to the market. And at least the clear thing for us is that it's not an innovation problem, like it is what happens or what it doesn't happen between all these stages that you see here. So, for example, in the Asian or in the incubation phase, many of youth are working isolated, or they are lacking of early stage investment. Later on, they face on regulatory inconsistencies. Even language sometimes has been a barrier for them. The good thing is that, and the hopeful thing, is that we are seeing good things also coming up as support for them. We're seeing along of the governments creating up these legislations. We are seeing blending finance, or the digital platforms that now are, like a blessing, is improving the access from mentors and markets. And overall, with the work that we had been doing, if we move to the next slide, and I don't know how I am in time. I'm trying to, I hope, and also I'm not too fast, but I'm trying to keep the pace. Overall, the one thing that we hope you take away from today is that restoration is not just about planting trees, but it's about creating jobs, building new economies from the ground up. And the people who is already doing this job, they need visibility, they need investment and support. And from our corner, from the G20 Global Land Initiative, we will keep pushing so this generation get access to what is needed, and not only for their benefit, but for the benefit of all of us. So thank you very much for the time, and I'm really happy to hear my colleagues in the panel. And I'm a little bit biased, I'm sorry, to the YECOs that are present.
Thank you, Fabiola, for highlighting how the G20 GLI empowers youth ecopreneurs as well as assisting us in driving the economies of the various countries across the world. So I think it's best to start with one of the ecopreneurs. So we'll start with Kemo from the Gambia, who is the co-founder of Green Up. He's leading local innovation under the Green Wall Initiative. Welcome, Kemo.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Keely. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, I really was looking forward to this panel, and basically for some of the aspiring ecopreneurs that are on the participant, and I wanted mostly to be here just to give you an insight into my journey into the restoration and what motivated me, as well as, some of the challenges that, I've had and what led to some of my transition. I mean, I've only become a businessman in about 1 year, 7 months. In 1 year, 7 months through the YECO program, I have transformed from just a donor-dependent organization to a fully fledged business. So I think this would be an interesting one. That's why I didn't want to prepare any presentation, but I would have loved to, extensively talk about our work on the Great Green Wall, which is a signature project of the African Union as well. So at 16 years, basically, I'm not this Kemo. I'm a different kind of Kemo. Back then in school, my dream was to become the Wolf of Wall Street. Money was everything for me, like everything that you talk to me about, it better be money. So I told my mother that, Wall Street is the only place where when I become a broker or a jobber, I'll be able to make $1 million a day. So that's where my dream is. So my whole focus in high school, I was studying to becoming a financial analyst. I almost even become a chartered accountant, all studying just because of money. So one fine day, things are getting a little bit tough. And my mother, who is an independent farmer, she used to get all the rice that she has in our rice fields. But, I'm from the Gambia, which is part of the Sahel, and there are certain climate crises that we are facing, notably, which is salt intrusion. Our country is divided into two by a river, so we have salt intruding. So my mom one day called me from the city, while I'm preparing to go to Wall Street, saving some money to get, a visa and all of those things. She said she needed to buy rice. So anything that comes in between me and my Wall Street dream, I must find out why this is stopping it. So she needed money to send to her in the village. So I went there to actually, in fact, prove that my mother just wanted to rob me from money, but she didn't really need rice. I remember as a child, we always grow rice. So when I went to these rice fields and then I stood in the salt, looking at the hypersalination, the bare patches, this awakened in me, I don't even know. It's like I became it's like I got to the realization of what are we looking for? Are we going to, leave this thing to die like this? Like something has to be done. So I ended up saying, okay, you know what? This is definitely urgent for my mother. And I gave her some of those funds. And my brother, who was also living with me, was very sad at that moment. He said, you know what, Kemo, I think that, staying in the Gambia is totally useless because €1 at that time was equivalent of $50. So lots of young people in Africa were migrating, and my brother had to jump on those boats to be able to get to Europe so that he can help us. And this guy was lost for more than 3 months. And since I was the one in communication with him, for 3 months, I couldn't sleep a bare 3 hours. I kept on lying to my mother about the whereabouts of my brother. So one day I got up and swore that my brother would be the last African youth to die in the Sahara and in the Mediterranean. So this is how I'm like, what do we bring to this solution to stop this back way? So I joined a youth network called Operation No Back Way to Europe. So there were so many of these NGOs, so many. There has been a proliferation of NGOs and youth organizations. So we thought that this was the way. So I started to join this youth organization called Operation No Back Way to Europe, sensitizing people. But one day people came to us and say, hey, Kemo, look, if we don't go to Europe, what do we do? Farming is casino gambling and climate change won't give us a chance. So this is when I learned about, how serious this climate change is. Not just my modest rice field, but it's one of the factors that is making people not to be attracted to land, the only factor of production that we have for free. So at the end of the day, this is affecting everything. And this was how I began to focus on climate change. So in 2016, I went to a global youth summit in Switzerland, and then I was given $1,000 to kind of fund an idea, which I think would be the start of a change. And this is how we came up with Green Up 10,000 Trees Challenge. We said, well, climate change seems to be the problem fueling all of this. So my project name was Green Up 10,000. But when we went to Facebook to open a project named Green Up 10,000, Facebook wouldn't allow us to use numbers. So we had to name it Green Up Gambia. And this became a household name in the Gambia because it has been one of the first tree planting initiatives that kind of made tree planting a lot more sexy, even for younger people. More and more organizations are set up. But we had great amount of support when we started, which was not, I wasn't seeing the future of the restoration economy 8 years ago. So we started as a donor dependent, like I've got support from the British embassies, the French embassies, the Embassy of Netherlands, you know, the UK High Commission, like they've all been supporting our initiatives, but only at a shorter cycle grant. They will give you $10,000 to implement for a year and mostly awareness raising. So at the end of the day, once that project phases out, I have problem keeping my staff or continuing our goal. So we've been doing this for quite some time, but I realized that to embed sustainability in our thinking, we have to be a going concern. We must not depend on aid. So this is where we started finding avenues. How can we make our projects sustainable for them to continue running? So this is how we get to the idea of social enterprising. How do we position ourselves? So from this donor dependent, now we realize that, well, no matter how much trees we planted, we're not planting fast enough than our land can regenerate. As a matter of fact, my country, the Gambia, has exported more wood than the Gambia's land mass itself can support. So more of activism was needed back in where I was. But now that we've seen that, well, our forest has depleted, we have only less than 40% of forest left. And this is because of fuel wood needs. And in the Gambia here, we saw an opportunity where we have tons and tons of waste, not just the Gambia, but the entire West Africa. We have a problem of waste. So we have so much waste piling up in our landfills that almost goes into just emitting methane, but not much value is being derived from this. And when we looked at some of the waste characterization studies, we realized that half of all the waste is in fact organic. And until today, our farmers are crying for some kind of chemical fertilizers, which has been destroying our soil. So we thought that, well, maybe operationalizing this could be a key way of keeping our enterprise going, of keeping Green Up Gambia going through creating this sustainable enterprise. So this is how we started to harness what we call green coal. I mean, if you hear coal, we all know that it's fossil fuel. But we came up with this name, green coal, as a way of just turning organic waste into valuable briquettes for fuel wood. Of course, our business model is producing biochar, which of course is getting popular nowadays. It's about, you know, putting the soil back to where it was from, you know, creating this organic soil amendments that can really help to revitalize our soils. But in the Gambia here, we realized when we started, this wasn't really making profit because it takes time for farmers to, you know, adapt to this biochar and buy this from us from large quantities. So even though we are not more concerned only with profit, but we realize that in order to keep this going, we need to create a different product. And charcoal is something that is really having a market value, and it pays more than the biochar that we're going to apply. So we had to keep on working at a small scale, providing charcoal until at such time that we can unlock investment to be able to provide biochar at such a large scale. And this is where, you know, for me, it was very transformational to be part of the YECO program, where we had to be trained on, imagine someone who has just been running a community-based organization. Now you have to run an enterprise where you're seeking investment that goes close to 400,000. Like, I don't really know where to go. So I think YECO wasn't just a boot camp and an accelerator program. For me, it was like some sort of a master's degree program where, you know, you are definitely graduating with a functional business. So within these 1 year of, you know, running from RIA and different places, meeting different investors, role play. Sometimes there are so much master classes that, you know, I get fed up. But in this process, within 1 year, 6 months of this operation, this biochar project, from running from just a small scale enterprise, now we are actually heading towards factory level operation. And we have been able to unlock 70% of our $400,000 funding just recently, with connections that even came from YECO. I mean, I could remember that I had more than 5 or 6 mentors through this program, but the last time, YECO had a program with EY Ripples, and then, they had to give us some of these lawyers as mentors to help us unlock finance. I remember that sometimes, you have to be relentless when you are when you're doing business, and especially when lives are depending on it. Sometimes if you are motivated by profit, it becomes a big deal. Because as a sustainable business, if you are into the restoration economy, we must always remind ourselves to forget about the rational economic model that always teaches us that growth is endless and growth will solve all of our problems. We must learn to embed purpose in our business. Our businesses must be purpose-driven such that we manage to operate our businesses within the ecological ceiling of the planet without overshooting the planet's resources. Profit must always be secondary, but when you solve a problem towards human well-being, wealth is not money, it's well-being. So if your business have to succeed towards the 21st century, you have to make sure that you define not just profit, but purpose to embed that. So this YECO program helped us to kind of, gather all of these things together. And even sometimes you develop something new. Young people are very innovative. But in the end, we are unable to realize our ideas because somebody always runs off and steals them. So YECO was able to teach us about, even this intellectual property stuff. So within 1 year, 6 months, I have been able to establish, a green coal business, and with little knowledge on, let's say, business and running a social enterprise, I was able to really, get the best from this program and to be able to have a function. And I think that there are so many grassroots organizations across that really need that kind of support. And this is why at Green Up Gambia, we support the African Union's agenda, which is the Great Green Wall Initiative. Some of our projects are tailored around supporting land restoration businesses across the Gambia. And we have our 5 model approach, which is power, that is galvanizing citizens agencies through citizens assembly to understand what is the ecosystem of the environment you are in. And then we have money, that is creating a community fund, a revolving fund that entrepreneurs can be able to tap in. Because as hard as we want to say it, every time somebody comes up with a creative idea, your problem basically will be finance. So without finance, sometimes you're stuck. And the finance, where to get it, how to command the confidence in investors, it's all new for some of these grassroots entrepreneurs. And this is where some of them sometimes get discouraged. And I think, just being here is to remind you that it's a testament that you have to keep up to your dedication and also embed purpose. That way you can have the motivation, the zeal, and the drive to kind of, get into operationalizing your work. And just to close, since I'm getting to a lot of time, restoration isn't just about, technical work. It's emotional, it's political, it's deeply human. Like when you see these things, people talk about climate change, maybe in the West, they haven't seen it. I have lived it. People who are close to me, people who I have loved, have suffered the harsh impacts of climate change. It changed our whole living dynamics here in the country, and we are seeing it firsthand. So I think we have to, it's like it asks us to rethink what, a human life would look like on this planet 100 years to come, what development really means, and what kind of legacy do we want to leave our children, as ecopreneurs. So for me, the journey has always not just been about planting of trees or producing energy from our briquettes or biochar to enhance the soil. It's about building a system that value life, connection, and regeneration. So as youths, we are not just bringing, how do I call it, just our appearance, because I know sometimes in the multilateral sphere, they're just giving youth a space, but doesn't really mean that we are involved in decision-making processes. Sometimes we do those camouflages, women empowerment, they will just get a couple of women to be at policy, but you look at sometimes the entire parliament is men. So we have to understand that restoration must be gender just and youth-driven. So we have to, not just youth are bringing energy to the table, but our imagination, the courage to question and experiment and create new pathways that did not even exist before. So to my word to some of these young people here or these ecopreneurs is that let's continue to be bold. Let's lead with a vision. Let's prove that restoration economy is not just viable, but it's necessary. And the future doesn't just belong to those with the most resources. it belongs to those who restore. So we have to understand that let's walk within the ecological ceilings. Let's not just embed profit as ecopreneurs, but let's put purpose. Let's look at how we position our businesses in terms of governance and ownership. This will help us to shape and leapfrog into sustainable development. To be honest with you, I am always worried, and truth must be told to the people, and we must always remind ourselves that we don't have much time. It will be just sooner before we press the on button to commit the Arctic, the Antarctic, and Greenland to melting. So Greta Thunberg was definitely right when she refused to go to school, because there is no future to fight for when we look at still how much subsidies are there for fossil fuel, how much extraction of fossil fuel is. Sometimes the eco-anxiety is real and reminds us that maybe we are only doing this before we commit the earth to irreversible changes that will, turn the whole planet to becoming a foe. So let's kind of always remind ourselves, whether locally, nationally, or at the multilateral sphere. So with that, I will close on now and then hand over back. Thank you.
Thank you, Kami. What a wonderful and insightful, definitely motivational talk from you. Now we move on to, these are our top 5 YECOs, guys. So please, we have experts in here. Now we move on to Mmakwena Moesi from Botswana, co-founder of Viva Organica. She's using biotech to promote organic farming and seed sovereignty in Southern Africa. Welcome, Mmakwena.
Hello, Keely. Thank you so much. Definitely, Kemo has set the bar high, but it was a wonderful, should I say, introduction to the work we're doing as ecopreneurs within the space. I'll briefly just say, from my end of things and my experience within this space, we will be clocking 10 years next year since we've conceptualized the business and have seen very important growth throughout this journey. And I'm really proud to say that since we have become affiliated with G20 Land Initiative and through the Ecopreneur program, we have seen immense support. We have also gotten a deeper understanding of what exactly it is we're trying to do through my startup based in Botswana, Southern Africa. And we still definitely do need to hold hands through this experience and not only, deepen our understanding as a startup, but also through the ecosystem that we operate. Most importantly, being the big decision makers, being the government, the public sector, and the non-governmental sector that we operate in. One thing I have come to really appreciate being in business is we do not work in silos. And the biggest thing is not to be big on inventing something new, but collaborating enough to really bring the value down to the society in a way that it builds our economies, it improves our livelihoods, and it restores our environment. So let me just quickly share my presentation with you. I believe I have 8 to 10 minutes to get through this. If you could just let me know if you see my screen. Are we good?
Yes, we can see your screen, Mmakwena.
Okay. Apologies, I don't know how to make it go full screen, but I hope we're together on this. Okay, so again, my name is Mmakwena Moesi. I'm from a startup based in Gaborone, Botswana, which is in Southern Africa. We're called Viva Organica, and we are a biotech startup that is eco-conscious and is providing sustainably sound, environmentally friendly organic inputs to our growing smallholder farming community in Botswana. Why we do this? We believe it is important to have equitable, affordable, and locally available organic inputs for our farmers and, you know, to not be left behind in the land restoration movement and adopting healthier and more productive and sustainable food systems in Botswana, in Southern Africa, and Africa as a whole. So here I'm portraying Tato, who makes around 60% of the clients that we work with, being a young female farmer who experiences declining crop yields year after year. Why is this the case? We're seeing soils growing drier, an increase in input costs, as well as an increase in pest and disease attacks. This is experienced across Botswana, with our smallholder farmers being farmers who typically grow between 1 to 5 hectares and minimal access to high tech to support their farming journey. They are the most vulnerable. They are the ones who are faced with higher degraded soils. It's for a number of reasons, being there's been a surge and an abuse in chemical inputs, both chemical fertilizers and pesticides, but also the effects that we're getting from climate change, being increased drought periods, erratic rainfall, alongside, you know, with Botswana generally having moderately or low fertile soils. This exacerbates our vulnerabilities as farmers to climate change. And already in Botswana, we have a very high food import bill that stands around 11 billion US dollars. And if we don't start viewing food production in a more sustainable way, not fighting nature, but finding ways, remembering again how to farm with nature, we will continue to see this phenomenon get worse and spread throughout Africa. Now, this is important that we find ways to not only tackle already the societal challenges that we face in my country. We have a crippling youth unemployment rate as I speak right now. I'm still within the youth bracket myself, and you'll come to learn in our later slides that we're also a youth-led company. We are 100% youth employees, and this is something that is very important to me, that in whatever we do with the solutions that we provide, we should always have at the back of our minds building very strong, sustainable jobs that are able to withhold themselves and provide value that is required. Africa is the second fastest growing continent in the world, and with a population set to double by the year 2050. As much as I've touched on the challenges that we face, this is also a huge opportunity for us as, you know, someone who is based in Africa, to not be so quick to look for solutions or a market for outside of Africa, but look into opportunities that live exactly in our continent here. And already we have a huge reliance on imports, fertilizer imports, with a percentage that stands at 80%, which is around 40 million USD. But at Africa alone, there's a larger market that stands at around 8 billion US dollars in just fertilizers alone. So we feel at Viva Organica that there's a need for affordable, regenerative and sustainable solutions to empower farmers like Tato, so that they, in their own right, are able to support their families and at large the community. So how do we do this? At Viva Organica, we are leveraging organic waste and circular economies by boosting biological processes to do just this. We employ a certain type of earthworm. The scientific name is called Acina fetida, which is extremely efficient at breaking down huge amounts of organic waste that, if not also treated well, stands to pollute the environment and cause more environmental problems. But instead of that, we divert this organic waste and take it to our worm farm. And within a period of 72 days, we have transformed this organic material into a nutrient-rich organic fertilizer. And through this process, we have gone to perfect our technique by liquidizing this vermicompost that we get from our worms into a liquid organic fertilizer called BioBrew. BioBrew is this bottle in the red, and I'm proud to say that it's now a legally regulated agrochemical in Botswana. And this is a feat that has taken quite some years. Again, we started conceptualizing this business in 2016. And through support that we've also gotten from our government through the Ministry of Youth, we accessed our very first seed funding in 2019. And in 2020, that's when we started the process, when we're now talking about regulatory frameworks as well. Fabiola, you also mentioned in your presentation, yes, it's definitely something that is something that needs to be taken heed of. As much as we understand looking at the nature of the agrochemicals that are in question, it is something to consider as we open up markets for green businesses as ourselves, that they do not stifle businesses to a point of collapse. So we started this process in 2020. Our fertilizer got approved in 2023. And since then, the company has also improved our value proposition by having a more holistic approach to the products and services we offer. So we've since also expanded our product to include heirloom seeds and biopesticides, all in the name of building sustainable and regenerative farming models that lessen our dependence on chemical interventions, but look to nature, look to biological technology that can support farmers in growing high quality and safe foods, so that we get to a point where we can see ourselves supporting farmers in Botswana who are now exporting to Africa and the world at large. So our competitive edge is, again, we are focused on being affordable, and that is why we look to adopting using materials within our environment, being organic waste. We are regenerative in everything we do, and we stand strong on being a locally made, locally produced products and companies. So far, our impact extends across 2,000 farmers that we have supported. This is through fertilizers and seeds that we have distributed to around 2,000 farmers in Botswana. And between the year 2023 and 2024, we've seen a jump in our revenue growth by 900%. And we are estimating around 500 hectares under some kind of sustainable production. This is through the intervention of our organic fertilizers, our seeds, as well as capacity development that we provide to our farmers. Through just the operations of our business, how our business model is centered around remediating waste, we have remediated around 100 tons of organic waste, and this is basically waste that has been run through our worm farm. To our right, that is the map of Botswana, and just to give you an idea of our footprint in terms of where you could find our organic fertilizers, I'm proud to say, by being a ecopreneur, being supported by YECO Community and G20 Land Initiative, as well as other funding opportunities that we have come across in the African continent. It is through their support we have been able to really up our production, complete our regulatory requirements, and partner with 4 retail stores. This was something that we managed by the end of 2024 last year. I'm proud to say we're now in the 13 stores countrywide. You can find us in all parts of the country, but the work doesn't end there. We're still working on really building our footprint on the ground, expanding our training programs to farmers, because one thing we have come to notice is, again, when we look at the needs of an individual, it always comes down to, do you have something to eat? Do you have something to provide for your family, to provide for your kids? And that is always, is this something that will add to my economic gain? By me using your fertilizers and seeds or taking your advice, will it boost my production on my farm? And that is where the education needs to come in. So this was just a quick indication of the work that we have done throughout these 2 or 3 years since being an affiliate with YECO. We've been able to achieve a lot of this work together. As I mentioned earlier on in my first slide, that is the market opportunity that exists for us. And for the next 3 years, our focus is going to be really solidifying our mark in Botswana's market and acquiring around 0.23% of our market share. And through building through the AFCTA agreements, as well as our regional trade agreements through SADC and SACU, we're really hoping that there will be an appreciation for our kind of products, but we do understand that there is absolutely a need for development and incorporation of land restoration economies within policy frameworks. I will say this is something that I am very passionate and vocal about in my country, as well as seeing that we still don't quite grasp or understand the value that land has, as well as in agriculture. So our market segments span across not only just our smallholder farmers, we have opportunity within the government agencies as well, NGOs, retail, and hospitality. When you talk about hospitality, we can look into agro-tourism, ecotourism, and sectors that are looking to really bolster food production that also works with aligning with conserving nature and the environment. So I do believe there's a lot of opportunity in my country as it stands right now, is just being able to sit around a table with people who are open-minded enough to understand and see the gaps for opportunities for this. Our business model, in a quick infographic, this is how it looks. We basically collect organic waste from some retail partners we've partnered with, and we take it through our worm farm. And through that, we're able to produce our liquid organic fertilizer and biostimulant that we then distribute through our retail stores to our farmers. And through the power of collaboration, guys, I'm very big on collaboration. Also, maybe I could also speak on just being honest and genuine and understanding that manufacturing is not an easy game. There's a lot that goes into it, especially in our kind of industry being agrochemicals. But I also do understand there is a critical need for the kinds of products that we are providing. So if I do have the opportunity, especially again, being very Afrocentric, I'm proud to say that our suppliers that we have signed an MOU with to be the exclusive distributor for the range of biological-based pesticides. They are a company that originates in Kenya. And through the advanced technology and science, they were able to build a range of these fungal-based and bacterial-based pesticides that basically support organic farming or sustainable farming and reduce the need for chemical intervention in the long run, if done well. So I am deeply honored to be part of this journey. As Kemo said, very, very purpose-driven. It's not easy. And one thing that we've come to really understand is there's a huge need for knowledge transfer. We are currently in the process now of not only just looking to producing and distributing our inputs, but now really speaking to providing education on the ground from grassroots level going up. As we've come to understand, by going to the farmer directly and helping them, they're able to influence government policies better, unlike looking like a cash-hungry business and driving opinions or suggestions to the government that may look to be only serving our company at large. So this is the next step for us, where we will be rolling out a very robust training program, partnering with other existing retail outlets that are interested in having farmers grow food sustainably and economically by reducing the need for inputs being the fertilizers, seeds, and pesticides, and something that we are very passionate about called integrated pest management methods, which basically speaks to looking at farming as a holistic approach, looking at cultural, biological, chemical, and mechanical measures that you would have to adopt when you look at farming. And with that, the premise is at the foundation, the key thing is soil health management. How are you feeding your soil? Are you feeding it adequately? Are you feeding it with living material? And that speaks to the compost material, that speaks to the beneficial microorganisms that help to retain moisture in the soil, retain nutrients in the soil, and at a bigger scale, that speaks to building resilience of our farmers, of our crops, and by that, over time, we are at the same time mitigating and adapting to climate change. So in short, as I mentioned, we are a youth-led company, but definitely we have our mindset on growth. There's a lot of opportunity in Viva Organica, as we are not only tech-driven, we're service-driven and community-driven as well. We're currently going through our raising funds for the company, and we aim by the year 2027, we should have grown our team from a team of 5 to 12 within these areas. And why would you invest in a company like Viva Organica? One, already we have a huge support from organizations such as G20 Land Initiative, where it is led by an award-winning ecopreneur. Being myself, I hate blowing my own horn. We have existing traction, a validated product in the market, and definitely an increase in demand. We are aligned with SDG goals 12, 13, and 15, and there is absolutely room for scalability. Now, I will speak to, again, we do not exist in silos. For this to be possible, definitely starts with the conversation we're having now, with the support that we're getting from G20 Land Initiative, but also to be able to continue this dialogue on a national framework and regional framework, so we can all adopt systems that speak to, for instance, if we look at land restoration in the agriculture sector, what are we doing? How are we supporting SMEs, youth businesses in being able to drive these initiatives? So I'm very happy to just share with you, this actually is a picture, or it's a design of our billboard, our very first billboard that is centered in the city center in Gaborone.
Sorry to cut you.
Sorry, this is the last slide.
We are a little bit out of time because we have to end in 4 minutes.
Okay.
And I would like no speaker. Sorry to cut you short.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, can I just say just this one thing? Very last thing.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, as a proud ecopreneur, this is a billboard stand through the support from being a YECO 2024 finalist. We were able, through our marketing budget, we're able to put this up and spread our visibility in our local market. So go YECO. Thank you.
Thank you. What impressive numbers, empowering 2,000 farmers in Botswana alone. Very impressive numbers from Viva Organica. Now I introduce final speaker, Dr. Todd Bendo is the director of Odum Institute for Research in Social Science at the UNC Chapel Hill. He's leading scholar in restoration economics and sustainable land use planning. Welcome, Dr. Todd.
Well, thank you so much. And it's amazing to hear all of the really cool work that's going on. So I just wanted to try to highlight kind of some of the bigger picture, and I'll kind of run through this as quick as I can. If you want to look at these slides, here's a link, as well as the report that I wrote for GLI that I think is getting released soon or is in process of being released. And this really speaks towards the restoration economy in a variety of different economies, right? Like in the developed world as well as in the developing world. So I first got interested in this topic because I've studied ecological restoration for a long time. And I was constantly having to justify, why am I doing this? And at the end of the day, there's a language that we can use, which really, I think, connects to what decision makers, politicians, the media, the public ultimately care about, right? Which is jobs and income. The Super Bowl, for example, last year, Exxon Mobil actually had an ad where they talked about how many jobs that they create. And ultimately, this is a part of this, this discourse, right? And ultimately, this narrative that you see all over the world, which is environmental protection, destroys jobs, right? We can't afford to do restoration. It's a dead weight loss on the economy. It's just harming everyone. And so we shouldn't do it. And so ultimately, beyond the fact that this ignores the lost productivity of degraded land and the enduring damage, it ignores the fact that ecological restoration can actually create jobs. And so ultimately, what we set out to do was understand the restoration industry and understand how it's connected to economic development efforts. And so ultimately, this notion that ecological restoration and requirements for ecological restoration, which I'll talk about in a second, basically redistribute the employment, right? Rather than, hey, we can do incredible amounts of environmental damage and we don't have to do anything about it. Ultimately, what this means is that companies that are damaging the environment do have to go to ecopreneurs like the ones you just heard from, and actually do something about the damage that they've done in all around the world. And so by paying those folks, we're paying for ecological restoration, but we're also creating jobs and economic output. So ultimately, we weren't the first people to start to look at this, right? There's been a huge amount of work. I actually give links to all of these different publications so you can take a look. But there's been a lot of work in this in the last 10 years, trying to understand, how does restoration actually produce kind of prosperity? So I want to point out something. This is a figure that the Society for Ecological Restoration created. I think it's a beautiful picture that talks about the kind of the benefits of gaining ecological integrity. But ultimately, there are these impacts of paying for restoration, of paying firms like Mmakwena's and Kemo's to ultimately create ecological uplift, to improve the environment. And so at the end of the day, These people that you see in this picture are actually doing something. They are getting paid for what they're doing, and then they spend that money in the economy. And this is ultimately the kind of an engine for economic growth. So in kind of longer versions of this, I can talk about the social and the ecological cases for ecological restoration, but ultimately we can talk about two different ideas here, the economic benefits, and this is a lot of what you just heard about. Healthy ecosystems, ecosystem service values, right? All of these great things that we can do to improve environmental quality, this notion of ecological uplift. That's not what I'm talking about. What I am talking about are economic impacts. And this comes down to two major concepts. The first being employment, how many jobs are created and maintained, and then economic output. And this is the revenue of restorers like Kemo and Mmakwena's firms, the direct economic impacts. They receive sales revenue, and they pay employees, for example. They also have to buy stuff. There's a supply chain. So there's these indirect economic impacts, and many of these might be local, right? If they're buying from other local firms. There's also a ripple effect across the economy from both their employees themselves and all of the firms that they're buying from, this whole chain of this whole supply chain. All of those folks get their incomes and they spend money in the economy, right? They go to the market, they buy food for their families, they spend money, right? And all of that is bouncing around the economy. And this is what we talk about as induced economic impacts. And so when we sum it all together, within a country, we talk about gross national product. We can also talk about a gross regional product if we're talking about specific regions, rural regions or metropolitan regions. And so at the end of the day, economic benefits, this way that we have historically talked about the benefits of better environmental policy and better environmental management, they're different than economic impacts. Economic impacts are part of economic benefit analysis, but it's something that's really been ignored, and it's a language that has really been lacking in this space. One that puts us on a footing with a lot of other industries to be able to talk about the importance of ecological restoration. So what is ecological restoration? We've got this theoretical definition, right, that the Society for Ecological Restoration has talked about. But ultimately, in understanding the industry, we kind of have to push that aside and redefine what restoration is. And what we did was we defined restoration as a combination of activities intended to result in ecological uplift and improve ecosystem health. And so ultimately what this means is that the restoration industry is the set of activities, the set of firms, individual organizations and companies that contribute to restoration. So if I ask Kemo or Mmakwena, do you do ecological restoration? And they said, yes, I do ecological restoration. Heck, I have a firm that does ecological restoration. This is how many people I employ. Then we could consider all of their firm's income as part of this industry. And so we actually did this back in 2014, and we published this in 2015. These are the figures that Fabiola cited. As we looked at this as broadly as we could in the United States, what we discovered is that in this industry, there was 126,000 jobs that were created just by the firms doing ecological restoration. And those firms basically had revenues about $9.5 billion. Now, this, if you were to say, what's the size of the ecological restoration industry in the United States, this is kind of the way that you'd talk about that. And so if you weighed this against other industries, you could start to do that, right? Things like coal mining, right, which has been a really political hot button issue in the United States. Coal mining doesn't produce a lot of jobs. It's become so efficient with mountaintop removal mining, for example, that we don't actually have to hire that many people to do it. And so as a result, right, it's not employing as many people. And so ecological restoration as an industry is actually bigger than coal mining in the United States. And so then if we looked at like all the supply chains and then all of the spending as a result of this ecological restoration, this is what we talk about as like the total effect of the industry, a $25 billion industry that touches almost 250,000 jobs and supports almost 250,000 jobs. So these are all the people that work in grocery stores and, you know, retail and anywhere else that you can imagine where people are buying stuff. And this is enabled by ecological restoration. So just to give you a sense, it's a lot easier in places like the US to talk about industries because we count certain things, right? So when you talk about the video game industry, it's like $100 billion industry in the United States. It's a much larger industry, but it's also a much easier industry to count, right? And that's partly because of the way that we consider different industries and what they do. If Kemo or Mmakwena, for example, were in the United States, when they registered their firms, they'd be asked, hey, what does your firm do? And the problem is that there's no way to easily identify as an ecological restoration firm, right? They'd either be some sort of, you know, agricultural firms or environmental consultancies. But this is what makes it really difficult. It's really easy to count things like video games or oil production, for example. So some quick takeaways. Ecological restoration can create tons of jobs. A lot of them are local, and it creates a lot of economic output. So we should try to ultimately maintain and enhance drivers of restoration. So these are some takeaways from that report that I showed you. Basically, what we can do is increase demand. How do we increase sales for these firms, right? Create incentives for restoration. Find ways of integrating restoration into what the government requires as part of kind of just the doing business for firms, especially foreign firms. If a foreign firm wants to come in and develop a port and they're going to do huge amounts of damage, they should be required to do restoration as a result of that. And you're actually seeing that in the mining industry internationally, right? These international requirements for mine reclamation. Having strong local public champions, right? A classic example is in the US, the invention of green roofs, right? Basically having, you know, like city halls be the examples that other private businesses can look to and say, oh, wow, they did it. We could do it here as well. And then finally, if restoration is used as offsets, then require high quality offsets, right? Require that you don't get to go to fly by night operations and do a shoddy job. You've got to go to companies like the two that you just heard from and buy quality products and quality restoration as a result. How do we increase supply of restoration? Well, we've got to lower barriers to doing it. Reduce uncertainty and risk, which is a huge issue in a lot of the places where we've got requirements for restoration. Create a high quality labor force. So I think that the GLI and UNCCD has been great in working towards creating, for example, freely available educational programs for restoration. I think that's incredibly important. So things like workforce training, regulators that are involved in this that really understand what they're doing. I think this is incredibly important. And then also focusing on creating local supply chains for restoration. If a country wanted to do a big restoration project, are they going to be able to hire local folks like Mmakwena and Kemo, or are they going to have to go to Europe or the United States? If you go and look at the Society for Ecological Restoration's website, they've got a restoration resource center, and you go through the firms that do restoration. It's really sad. I mean, they're almost entirely located in the United States or Canada or Europe. And this is something I think that really needs to change, especially when you look at how many firms are interested in doing work in places like Africa, South America, Asia. Ultimately, what countries can also do is track restoration as an industry. In the United States, we have something called the North American Industry Classification System. every industry you can think of is given a code. And what this allows you to do is to really, really easily track how many people are employed in this whole industry. How many, if Kemo's in this industry, how many competitors does he have, right? Where are they located? Well, it'd be really interesting easy to determine that kind of thing using a system like this, but we don't actually have that for restoration. And so there's this idea: do you create this hierarchically, right? Is there, because of a driver, right? It's mine reclamation or port reclamation or agricultural degradation and firms that are aimed at improving soil, for example. How do we consider those in the way that countries classify all of their different industries? And so what we suggested was engaging groups like the Society for Ecological Restoration, which is one of these international groups, to try to do this, to try to create a broad and inclusive typology of American restoration. But this should be done all over the world. What does restoration mean in the Gambia, for example? What are restoration activities taking place there? We might consider that restoration differently in the United States, where we have different ecosystems, right? And finally, think about restoration as an economic development tool. So thinking about things like regional competitive advantage, right? What firms like the two that you just heard from are giving their local economies a competitive advantage over other economies, other places, even in their own countries. So if I'm located in one of their countries and I want to employ them, I want to hire them, I want to pay them money, that money is going outside of my region. And so their region is getting a competitive advantage as a result of that. This is a great tool for rural economic development. A lot of restoration and large restoration projects are taking place in rural areas that often have very low employment. So things like workforce training investments and even sustained investment programs, not just sprinkling money around like international development organizations love to do. Here's some money, here's some money, here's some money. Instead, having long-term focused investment in a place such that you're actually incentivizing firms to develop around those types of investments, and then they can grow and find other opportunities. So ultimately, to kind of think about how we can incubate these restoration firms kind of regionally within a given countries, so countries could create their own restoration economies. So ran through that. There's lots to read about this, and point you to these slides, the report, and then lots of stuff that we've written on this. So thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. You've shown us how restoration is not just an ecological, it's an economic opportunity for youth everywhere. Thank you, Dr. Penn, Dr. Todd. Unfortunately, we cannot take questions now. We have run out of time. So I want to genuinely thank our speakers for joining us today. We truly appreciate your time and effort. Truly appreciate it, as well as join us again on the 11th of July, where we'll be discussing everything agriculture. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.